resume our recording. Welcome.
All right.
Great. Let me share my screen. And we can get going. Looks like we got another Noemi in the waiting room. And they just keep coming. Great. Can you all, welcome. Welcome. You are here with us, the Keystone Development Center, for the second session in our Boost Camp series. We're so glad to have you with us. Folks who were here last time got to hear from KDC board member Dami Odotolo and also Kate Katib of Seed Comments about capitalizing our co-op's next big move. If you missed that but are interested, we are recording these sessions. Those recordings are made available on YouTube and on KDC's website. So that is a word to the wise that tonight's session will be recorded. If you are not comfortable being recorded, you can go ahead and turn your camera off. If you are comfortable, we'd love to see you here. This will be, would love the chance for interaction. But you can go back and watch sessions that you might have missed or want to explore and dig a little deeper or recollect something. So we've got tonight's session and then a few more others coming up over the course of the next few months. We encourage you to sign up to join us for more sessions. I will drop the link for that in the chat when I'm not sharing my screen, but this is the schedule for our sessions together. Again, all of them will be recorded. We're really excited to be joined by just some really wonderful cooperators from around the region as we kind of work to build our cooperative muscles and skills for all of us that are part of co-ops across the Mid-Atlantic. The session's made possible by the Cooperative Development Fund, so Foundation. So we're excited and grateful for that. And we will have a survey at the end. And we also, because of the support from the Cooperative Development Foundation, are able to offer food vouchers for folks to hopefully make it a little bit easier for people to participate in real time. You should have received, if you registered ahead of time, you should have received information from Hannah from KDC on the call to do that. If you need that information, send Hannah a message here, and that offer will be available for the sessions throughout this course. So we hope you'll join us for more. And in a minute, I will drop the link in the chat to register for more sessions. So with that, I will hand it over to Noemi to introduce our speaker.
Thank you. So we have three wonderful speakers tonight. Ajowa Ifateyo is a cooperator who has started a housing co-op and has worked in worker co-ops and works as part of the GEO Collective Grassroots Economic Organizing, is a fellow graduate with me of Southern New Hampshire University School of Community Economic Development. Go Shnu.
Yeah.
And lives in Washington, D.C. And we are also joined by Jim Johnson, who is just outside D.C. In Silver Spring or Tacoma Park. I always get them mixed up, whichever.
Silver Spring's a little cooler these days, so yeah.
Okay,
so
let's go with that. And Jim has been a worker owner of a tech co-op, has been a volunteer and staff member of a food co-op, has been a cooperative developer for years and years, collaborates with the Baltimore Roundtable for Economic Democracy, has consulted for KDC in the past, is very much a seasoned cooperator. And I am so pleased to welcome Ben Ledewitz, who is a KDC board member and a founder and worker owner at Fourth River Workers Guild. Did I get that right? Yep. Which is a worker co-op based in Pittsburgh, and also a participant in the Pittsburgh Chamber of Cooperatives that brings together co-ops throughout the Pittsburgh area. So I have invited all three of these people to basically just kind of tell you all new cooperators or new to cooperatives some of the things they wish they knew early in their co-op lives, maybe a few juicy stories, like just really be able to share their wisdom as people who have been around the block and have seen a lot of stuff. And we'll have each of them kind of give a little talk about what they want to share, and then we'll open it up to questions, including questions from each of them to each other, which I'm sure, as true cooperators, they are always eager to learn more. So with that, I will turn it over to Ajowa.
Okay. Oh, okay. So, well, I think one of the most important lessons is to remember that, once we set up structures and guidelines and everything, which I will call the skeleton of the cooperative, it's important to put meat on those bones, flesh to make it alive and live. And so, one of the best ways to do that is to bring your people together socially for no other reason but to have fun, to get to know each other, to learn to trust each other, to know that, hey, this person's politics is a little out there, but I love them anyway. Or, they tell these weird jokes that make me laugh or whatever. So, you could also do some co-op work, you could have some political discussions, but the main thing is just some FaceTime, just to get to know them and appreciate something about them, or to realize, okay, that person's a little strange, but they're in our co-op and I like them anyway. So that's key. And so one of the things one of the ways you can do that, and there's several little small ways, is to maybe have a co-op night, or game night, or go to the movies together, have a potluck, everybody bring some food, we sit down and talk, dancing is always good, something to take people out of their comfort zone, maybe, to get away from all the the policies and the words and the writing and the meetings and all of that, and just have fun. So whatever way you can have people to have people to make fun, create some joy and some love and appreciation for each other as human beings, will take you a long, long way. So most of my experience has been in the Ella Jo Baker Intentional Community Cooperative. That was started 21 years ago by one of our members who saw gentrification happening in DC and decided to try to hold on to some of the housing and create an activist community. And so that meant that everybody, it's an intentional community. So everybody who was part of the co-op had to be involved in something activist related. It didn't have to be hardcore political. In fact, one of our members was just visiting AIDS patients in the hospital. And 20 some years ago, AIDS was a big thing. And they weren't getting a lot of help and attention. So her contribution to society to make the world a better place was to visit people in the hospital. So so there's a lot of contradictions that came with that. Being an activist community meant we were all involved in other stuff. I was in the worker co-op movement at the time. Most of my work was nationally. I was part of the founding board member of the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. I think, oh yeah, and after that, me and some folks in DC worked for an entire year to set up a cooperative copy shop. We had gone to the first Eastern Conference for Workplace Democracy in Maryland, and I met Erin Rice, who was a member of Collective Copies. And I was so impressed by her presentation that I was like, we can do that. And so I came back to DC, and two of my friends decided we were going to do the same thing in DC. We found this guy who had a print shop who wanted to sell it. And so we started meeting every day for a year. And so that's a good story too. When you're setting up a co-op, you have to take into consideration that people need to live. So we went a whole year, we planned everything. And when it was time to, like quit our jobs, we were a little afraid to do it. And one person had money in the bank, and the rest of us were just like, the working class, working poor, didn't have a whole lot of money. So it was like, okay, who's going to quit their job to start the co-op off? And the person who had money in the bank was, like willing to like loan the co-op money, but a friend of hers talked her out of it. And so, it was just too scary for us to make that leap, to just go in and, not know how to pay our bills and just, try to make it work. So that's one piece of advice to, if you're not already thought about it and, there's not going to be a lot of money, how do you make the impact less of an impact on individuals? Like they have to pay their rent or, whatever, car note, how to make that more of a communal sacrifice. Let's not call it a sacrifice so much, but yeah, so that's one thing. And in the circumstances might differ in each co-op, but supporting people, how to support people through that. But to get back to the Ella Jo Baker, yes, sharing the risks story is that, so once we thought that we also were organized ourselves as a multicultural co-op. So we started, there were about 5 African American women. When we recruited, it was only 15 units. I think we had 2 one white woman, 1 Lebanese man, a Jewish woman. So it was two white women. One was Jewish, 1 Hispanic woman. Yeah. So anyway, my point, I may have gotten all the numbers mixed up, but we were mixed. And so one big problem was, how much time do we have? Am I within time?
Yeah, maybe another couple minutes.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things was that one of the big contradictions was being an activist co-op meant that we didn't want to take time to like work on co-op stuff. We were so busy doing stuff outside of the co-op that, we had some issues with people like, hey, we got to save some time to make sure the co-op works well. But the other thing that we learned from that experience was that just because we have the same goals and believe the same things doesn't mean that we don't have to work at understanding each other. And so we realized that even though we wanted to be a multicultural organization, we still needed to talk about each other's cultures, each other's beliefs, learn how to work together, do some education, political education, all of those things. So to sum up, my advice would be definitely get to know each other and not just across the table. To know who each other is as individuals, but also who we are culturally and politically and whatever quirky ways we are. And, love the quirk, love each other. Everybody has something unique to contribute. and we need to appreciate it, whether we agree with it or not. Just learn to live together or work together as a microcosm of the world. If we could do it in our co-op, then certainly the world can figure out how to live together. Check.
Awesome. Thank you, Ajowa.
Thank
That was
you.
great. Love the quirk. Good advice. Jim, do you want to hop in?
Sure. And how many minutes do I have? Give me a parameter here.
I'll give you 12 minutes.
12 minutes, really? Okay, 6:30. All right. Really appreciate the opportunity to share this. And I think it follows on to what Ajowa was saying. I'm going to put a, let's see if I can, too many windows open as usual. I'm going to put a link in the chat for those who want to look at it. I don't want to distract you, but it's something you can download. It's something, a collaboration between myself and another person. We were both in the supporting co-ops through the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, supporting startup worker co-ops. And we also were active in Baltimore, helping start worker co-ops in Baltimore. And so it's a one-page, vastly oversimplified steps to starting a worker co-op, a handout that I've built a whole workshop around, actually, over the last several years. And the way this dovetails and picks up where Ajowa left off, I think, is one of the most common things that happens to us when we got a phone call or an email from someone who wants to start a co-op, especially a worker co-op, is they'll say, I need help incorporating. I need help doing the legal side of things, right? And you'll see from that Steps to Startup handout, which was adapted from a USDA document, I should give it credit. The incorporation is right near the end of the process. The legal stuff is like right near the end. And I think that emphasizes like, what is your foundation really? And like Ajowa was saying, the foundation is the culture of your founders group. Culture is this incredibly important thing that totally bears upon the success or failure of a co-op. And so you want to start nailing that culture from the very beginning. That's one of the most important things I can say to anybody. Focus on your working group. You focus on, do you have the same vision, really? Do you have the same mission? You might think you have the same thing in mind, but dig into what you're really talking about and what it means to each individual to make sure you're actually on the same page with what it is you're trying to do, right? The role you would see for yourself in your startup co-op. And really, that you make this, that you're sort of coming from the same place in terms of making decisions together, sharing power. We're talking about sharing power, economic power. We're talking about sharing risk, and we're talking about sharing the benefits, all democratically. And this is something that, coming from the economic and political and cultural context of this country, this is something that most people are not accustomed to doing. And it's wonderful. Those of us who have done it usually get addicted to it, and we're not willing to go back to not doing it. Okay. So those of us who have done it, we get hooked on it. But it's a process. Okay. Most people don't take to it readily. I use the metaphor, and I'm going to give you some examples of cultural challenges and dynamics in a minute. But I wanted to, identify some principles here. It helps me, I think, to explain or remind people that whether it's any kind of enterprise, but especially a cooperative enterprise, it's like a goose laying golden eggs, really. If the stars line up, if you can do the footwork and you can stand it up and you got a viable business model, you will get more out of it than you put into it. And that's what makes it magical. And when you're doing it democratically too, where in a shared power model, it's even more amazing to see you're getting more out of it than you're putting into it. But it involves, sharing risks, sharing benefits. And I think one of the things that Ajowa was alluding to in a way was making sure you're aligned with, aware of and aligned on what the responsibilities are of co-op membership. Co-op membership has rights. You have an equal say in what goes on. You have an equitable say to the surplus revenue, what we call patronage dividends, profit sharing. Okay. And so there's all sorts of rights you get with membership, but just like other types of rights and freedoms, there are responsibilities that come with membership rights. This is something that all the founding members need to be very clear on from the very beginning. And to me, one of the most important founding documents of a co-op, in addition to its articles of incorporation or article of organization, that the legal side of it, in addition to its bylaws, which structure how you're actually going to share power, it's ideally, really, I would urge everyone, make sure your founding co-op, one of the first things you do, you create a document of rights and responsibilities. And we can share versions of this. There's versions of it out there, but a lot of co-ops have this document, and it's like scales. They balance each other. The rights and responsibilities are like two sides of the same coin. That's what will help your co-op be strong. Okay. When all members are, aware of their rights and they use their rights, but they're also aware of their responsibilities, and they're, being very candid and very committed to fulfilling their responsibilities of membership. So a couple of the examples I'll try to touch on quickly. Both of these examples relate to workers buying out an existing company and turning it into a worker co-op, what we call a conversion to worker ownership. And one company, I don't have permission to use their names, so I'm not going to name them, but they were a website development company, and they had gone to a lawyer first. Okay, and the owner of the company, enlightened person, didn't want to exit the company, but didn't want to run it all by himself anymore. Liked his coworkers a lot, liked the people he'd hired. His company was growing, and he was like, he'd heard about worker ownership and worker co-ops, and he was like, I want to share this company with my workers. I want to share ownership. I don't want to do this all by myself. Okay, I want a workplace democracy, even though I could run the whole thing myself. So he went to a lawyer, and the lawyer walked them through the whole legal thing, set them up as a worker co-op, and figured out how the workers were going to buy the company from him and how to value the company. Did all that legal, technical, financial stuff. Didn't do any of the culture work. Okay. Didn't do any of it, right? And there were a dozen workers in the business. 5 of them bought in right away. And they were sold enough on the idea that they just jumped in and did it, bought in. There were 7 other workers in the co-op, and they were very interested, but they felt like they didn't have enough information. What am I really committing to? They were not clear on the rights and responsibilities of worker ownership. Okay. And they didn't have any sort of training or what we like to call worker owner readiness training. Okay. And so they'd been together about a year, 5 out of 12 workers being worker owners. They didn't know how to bring on new worker owners, what we call onboarding worker owners. And fortunately they stumbled across a colleague of mine who trains co-op boards. And he put me in the loop, and my colleague and I together worked with these folks for about a year, so that and we built them a training program, not only to train up and orient these 7 workers who were interested in becoming worker owners, but also something they could turn into an ongoing training program that they could deliver to new workers who were interested in being worker owners. We built them an onboarding program for future workers as well. But it was shocking to me, actually, that these folks had been converted by well-intentioned, clever attorneys, okay, who had done absolutely none of this building the cultural foundation, vision, mission, rights and responsibilities, making sure the workers know what they're committing to. Okay, this is what we should be doing before we get to legalities. Even before we get to financial feasibility, we want to make sure that that preliminary group of people understands what's involved here. So this is a cooperative principle: education and information, making sure members know what's involved in actually the rights and responsibilities of being a member. And yes, fulfilling their responsibilities, but also exercising their rights is very important. Don't just know your rights as a member, use those rights. make sure you're informed. Make sure you're engaged with your co-op because you're a co-owner. So that's one example, and I've only got a couple minutes, so I'm going to try to wrap this up. But there's another example, a good news example, and this one I can name, another conversion to worker ownership, and there's a cautionary tale in here too. There's a veterinary operation in Seattle called Urban Animal, started by a very committed, amazing woman about 10 years ago. They now have 3 locations, over 100 worker owners, and you may have heard there was a Freakonomics podcast on this, I think in January of 2024 or 2023. They did a 2-parter. The private equity firms are eating the veterinary industry in the United States and buying up businesses and, squeezing the staff and skimming profits. And the owner of this veterinary operation in Seattle was offered $25 million by private equity for her business. But she knew what they were doing to the veterinary industry, and she's so committed to the care of the animals and the respect for the workers and the customers. She told private equity to go to hell, and she decided to sell the business to her workers for $5 million. Okay, so she walked away from 20 million in order to do the right thing. And she looked at it and said, I don't need 25 million. 5 million is plenty. Okay. And so they're in a years-long process. I could go into some detail about how we're actually converting over 100 workers to an ownership culture. But the bottom line is we're seeing more of this now. We're seeing more and more large conversions with enlightened owners who maybe could get more money or maybe could have an easier process, but they realize they're going to lose the beautiful business they built if they sell to a competitor, they sell to private equity, they sell to the highest bidder, right? And more we're seeing multi-million-dollar businesses where the owner is committed to selling to the workers through a more involved process than they might otherwise get. And so, what is making this possible? We now have a lot of funding in parts of the worker co-op movement. In some ways, it may be easier to get funding for disadvantaged populations. Last couple weeks ago, you heard from Kate Khatib from Seed Commons, and they have become, in the last 10 years, they've gone from an idea to like a $60 million loan fund for worker co-ops, and they focus on lending to people, both workers who want to buy the business or people who want to start a worker co-op. They focus on lending to people who can't get loans elsewhere. Okay, if you can get a loan from a bank to start a worker co-op, they're probably not going to loan to you. They're going to say go to the bank. But there's a lot more funding available, impact investment. And we're all hearing about billionaires who are destroying the world right now, but there are also millionaires and billionaires out there who are actually trying to do a lot of good with their money. And a lot of money is now coming into the worker co-op movement to help people start worker co-ops. And a lot of it is coming to people who otherwise could not get loans. And so that's one of the beautiful developments. And I wanted to speak up for impact investment. There's challenges in all directions. There's slippery slopes and ethical challenges in all directions when it comes to a lot of money coming into the movement. But people like myself and Ajowa can remember how 25 years ago, a worker co-op just could not get a loan from a bank unless, the founders had property and could put up their personal assets at risk to get a loan for their business. We still can't get loans from the Small Business Administration without personal guarantees or institutional backing of some kind. So the great news is we're going like gangbusters in the worker co-op movement right now in terms of worker buyouts, conversions, startup. It's amazing how much energy and funding there is available now in the worker co-op movement. So I wanted to say there's great news there, even as it's crazy and growing and we're all struggling to manage the growth as well. So that's I'm over by 2 minutes, but I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you, Jim. And it's great to hear both both those stories that, really hearing the importance of building culture, at every stage. Cool. Ben, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sounds great. How's everyone going? Hope everyone's well. I will share a link to our company so that if folks want to just poke around, you have some sense of sort of what I'm talking about. And I think that I'm gonna tell some stories here, and I think that they relate to everything that has been spoken to now, which has been about membership. It's been about connection with the people who you are working with, about the culture. And the necessity for really leaning into these. I mean, we've heard you know, really inspiring ideas and stories about the culture, and really there's a focus on this culture because well, to be honest, cooperatives are not sweeping the nation the way that we would like them to be doing, and there's a fit with labor that's tricky. It's tricky in America. We don't have, what is it, like 7 or 9% of Americans are business owners. Most of us who are owners and own something don't own in a sort of shared ownership type of fashion. And so when we get into, I'm going to speak specifically, and I'll give you a little background here from a worker owner perspective. These are new things for a lot of folks, and so there's justifiably a lot of focus on the culture, on the membership, on having connection, and I'd like to give you some history from our going on 13 years as a worker owned business here. So our business is Fourth River Workers Guild, and we do ecological restoration and residential landscape. And um, when we began, I was one of the founding members, and it was myself and 3 others, plus one person who's moving out of town, but just loved the idea, and so kind of helped us out. And we grew from there to in a few years we had 7 worker owners. And at the time, our policy was that you had to be a worker owner to work at the company. We actually didn't even have a probationary period. There was a sort of small sort of test, amount of hours that you could give in the business. And and it was really great. We had great connections. We had great meetings. A lot of our meetings were unpaid meetings at the time, which led us to have 4 or 5 hour sprawling meetings and talk about our ideas and how we wanted things to be. So we had a lot of vision. But definitely a problem with the business side of things is that we didn't have a lot of focus in what exactly the service was. And so one of the things that came out of that time was you could show up at work and one day uh, um, you might have a saw and a tape measure in your hand, and the next day you might have a soil knife and some trimmers in your hand, and so there was sort of a lack of service, a lack of repetition. Um, that was a great time. Over after about 6 years, we were going into 7 years. People's lives were shifting around. People were doing things. That's a long time for people in their young 20s, early 30s. And one fellow joined us with barely any construction experience, and 3 years later was teaching natural building in Vermont, and is still up there doing that. Another one sold his house and went up and started a farm in Vermont. One moved on to be a social worker. Another got their dream job at a local botanical nursery in the area. So great things were happening, but people were sort of moving through, right? There was a transition that was happening. And through the and through that transition was an opportunity to realize from a business perspective, we were not thriving. We weren't killing it on the profit side of the business. So this wasn't just like, how do we deal with this lump sum of profit at the end of the year? And we really need to really understand our equity, distributions here and our patronage distributions here. That wasn't happening, and that doesn't help to keep people around, honestly. But we knew that we had good skills, and our focus on craft was really going to was really building on something. And so we were able to bring that in focus. COVID hit, we really shrunk down and we reduced who we were. Then, and when we brought people back on, it was very focused. We were now hiring people based on the knowledge that they had to bring that into the company and really improve the service that we have. And right now, where we stand, we've got a great product. We've got a great service, and we're looking to build. We've got 3 people in the business, small business. We've got 3 people in the business now with over 4 years, including myself in the business, and currently hiring 3 more. So that's sort of just a recap of the business from one perspective. And I want to kind of go back through and talk and give another story of the company from sort of the labor's perspective, really looking at how ownership relates to the business, how people approach ownership, how people approach working labor, and that whole relationship to the business. So when we started out, as I said, we had a lot of cohesion. And when we were hiring, I mean, some of these hires were around the campfire, talking to folks, just loving the life of we're a cooperative. This is what we're doing. And we're talking about that. It's about the organization and people, there was a buzz. And so people were into it. And so we were really hiring on a cultural fit and hyping up. I mean, we were excited about being a worker-owned company at the time. And that was really great. But at times there were people would wear ownership as sort of a badge. So there wasn't a lot of experience in sort of what it meant to be an owner. We were talking it up. It was great. You want to come on board? You want to be an owner? Oh yeah, I'd love to own a business. Let's go do that. But we don't have much experience in it. We were having a lot of meetings. We were trying to orient, but this isn't stuff that comes overnight. It really you don't pick up the understanding of how to operate. What does it mean to own something in a shared capacity with others? With people. We had people with kids and their families, and we had to support all of that, and what goes into that, and you have to focus on that. So some folks kind of had ownership as sort of a badge that they wore, and I would say there wasn't really a lot of tension around that. It was just an acknowledgement that there was a diversity in sort of how people approached ownership and approached their responsibilities, but everybody was chipping in for the most part in what was going on, certainly in those days. And as people started to move on and find new jobs, it was all great. It was like, this is exciting. It was all, very personal, like, oh, you've been talking about doing this thing, and now you're going to go on and do that. And then we had some challenges, and COVID didn't help that out because we'd really shrunk down our numbers. We were down to 3, and then COVID hit. And it wasn't exactly the time to be going out and hiring a ton of people. And while at the same time, we're trying to sort of restructure and understand what we were doing. So we got and at one point there were just two of us in the business, and at that point we had started out the business with all of our meetings were sociocratic, and followed most of the formatting on that. Our operating agreement is structured, and spells all of that out. But when you have just two people, you don't need all of that. You're just talking to each other. You're just every day you're out there, and you don't need all of that. So that's that side of it. The rigor that we were really holding up high in terms of the meetings and the structure of it sort of fell to the backside. And at the same time, we were really focusing on the focus, like getting the business going, because if we were going to build this back up, it had to be financially viable, because people were moving on to do great things, but also there wasn't like this huge, like great opportunity in front of you. So when we built back up, we one of the things that we recognized was having people on strictly as owners. You come in and you have to be an owner. That didn't make any sense at all. It was really difficult for folks. It was like this like ultra egalitarian approach to things, which was cool at the time, but it just wasn't sustainable. And so we're going to get into a probationary period, but also we're really focusing on landscaping, and we need some seasonal workers. So we need to understand that we have employees. And so we have sort of an employee base that's starting to come in to do some seasonal work. And what an opportunity. Let's hire these folks, as I mentioned before, specifically for the knowledge that they bring into the business. And as I mentioned before, that was awesome. But what we didn't focus on, we weren't hiring people around a campfire. We were on Indeed. We were sending. This was the first time we're going out and like advertising positions. And things were good for about a year. This is about 2 years ago now. Things are good for about a year. And then towards the end of last year, we hit sort of a cultural hiatus. Our workers were hands in their pocket unless you tell me what to do. The idea that somebody is going to come in here and sort of quasi self-manage is just a fantasy. And we are here to have a boss. You tell us what to do. And we're like, you signed up for it, like, that this is a cooperative, like, even if you have like misunderstandings about what that was, but it became sort of this like, almost like a rebellion. Like, this is going to be, we're here as workers, and we need a manager, and these are sort of the list of demands that workers are going to have, and your job postings are not doing justice, because this is not what the labor pool out there is going to provide. And that was demoralizing. There was a point, certainly towards the end of last year, where it was like, I've never signed up for this. This is craziness. But that has worked itself out, and now we've turned around our hiring and are looking at a balance of hiring for both knowledge and the and sort of, I guess you would say, the cultural side. But really what we're looking at is for people who have have some experience in what they are doing, and understand why maybe a cooperative might be the right move for them, because we've been through, people are just excited about cooperatives, and there's challenges there. So finding folks, and it's not like we have like a huge pool of people who are extremely knowledgeable in the specific tasks that we need them to be knowledgeable, and have also have some background that's relevant to cooperatives. And I think that it's interesting, at the exact same time that we were facing sort of a like anti-cooperative pro-boss movement within our own company, there was a peer worker cooperative company in our city. Similar size, 5 to 7 people, has been going on about the same number of years, about 10 years or so. And they had the exact opposite. And they had hired some folks who were sort of radical, anti-oppression, and a month they have a rather mid-level probation period, so 6 months to be an owner. And these folks at 5 months were trying to unionize the non-workers, and the owners were like over the top, like trying to they were holding meetings after meetings after meetings to just be inclusive, inclusive, inclusive. And it just wasn't good enough. And it actually drove one of the founders out of that business, unfortunately, because they had they were really demonizing this person and chasing them down. That business is still there. It's doing well. So all of this is sort of the difficulty of meeting the challenges of people coming into your company, and what that means to be a cooperative when you don't experience that elsewhere. And me having lived through that now for 12 plus years and seeing sort of different sides of that as they come and go. And I think that all just reflects back on my colleagues here and what they presented related to, if you're missing the membership side of it, if you're missing the connection side of it, if you're missing the some of those cultural sides of it, however you want to go about it, and what's involved in that. And there's a lot of work in that. There's a lot of time that goes invested into that, that you don't have in other business models. And it can be really valuable. It can be really enjoyable when it all comes together.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. That was great. I mean, what a, really looking at so many different sides, the like pure culture, pure just tell me what to do, worker, and then like trying to find that balance now. And you've really been through it. Um, Wonderful. I would love to know if folks have questions for our speakers, or if our speakers have questions for each other.
I do have a question about education. Education is so very important, and I would just like to see how other people think about it. There's education on what it is, what it means to be a co-op, but there's also the industry specific education, and then there, is technical kind of education, how to facilitate a meeting, you know, how to do the books, or, things like that. Um, but I think there's other things about cooperation that we need to really talk about, because people will say, "Hey, I love the idea of co-ops," but they don't always act in that way. They sometimes will get into power trips. People, I think, sometimes naturally or whatever, they want to have control. And so, how do you educate people who live in a society that is all about individualism and not so much about cooperation? How not to get tricked down that line, or how not to do what is natural and normal, because you grew up in this hierarchical society. And now you're asking me to work and consider other people or the co-op first. So, how do you all see doing all these levels of education and how important it is?
Yeah. I'd love to hear from someone who's really seen somebody, either somebody in leadership or somebody who's you know, maybe more frontline, make that transition from I'm just seeing things in a individualistic way to, oh, I really get it and I'm going to act differently. Uh-oh. Silence.
It's a hard one. Sometimes we don't even recognize it's happening.
Oh. I mean, I think it can be done, but it's a really big lift, right? Because they have to provide the feedback to the person, like, hey, you know, we love what you know how to do. We like you as a person, whatever, but you know, there are ways in which you're not fitting well with what we want to do as a cooperative. So you have to give them that kind of kind but firm feedback, and then they have to hear it, right? And they have to think, oh, it's important enough to me that I'm going to try and do something different. And then they have to actually start doing something different and, you know, hopefully get enough of a reward from things working out better and, you know, things seeming good that they're going to keep going until they really get to a place where now they have a different mindset. I mean, it's theoretically possible. But yeah, I mean, I think I have seen it maybe like, you know, sometimes there are owners who kind of like the idea of a co-op, but then when it actually comes down to, you know, selling to others and giving away the power that they had, not just, you know, the business, but like so in a conversion. And so then sometimes it's a process too where they're like, oh, wait, you mean I don't get to make all the decisions? You mean everybody's not going to just defer to me? But then sometimes because, you know, they've gone a fair ways down like the selling of the business, the technical part, they kind of go like, oh, okay, you know, and they start making that shift in mentality. What do you think, Jim?
You're reminding me of how many times the first call that I've had with someone who wants to start a co-op is they'll say, I want to start a co-op, but I need to be able to override any decisions that the other workers are making that are bad decisions, right? And so, and I think it speaks to what we're talking about. You know, we can talk about the cooperative principle of education and information, but when we really look at what it is we're trying to do, like what does shared power really look like when you're really doing it, right? It is about learning. There's a tremendous amount of learning. It's like learning that never stops, actually, but it's more than that too, right? And it's like, and the National Cooperative Business Association says co-ops make better citizens, right? And it's really, we can talk about how, okay, this is democratic co-ownership of an enterprise, but it's also about co-ownership of the economy, right? It's about co-ownership of the world. It's about co-ownership of our neighborhoods and, you know, humanity, okay? I think we can't help but get into that. And that's what makes it difficult and hard, because it's really about, you know, taking more responsibility for, you know, being a human being, actually, and the impact that we have. And trying to be holistic about it, because we can see the impact that happens when people are just punching a clock, you know, when and the human cost as well as the social cost of not having a sense of ownership of work, right? Of being alienated from the product of your labor, of really just, I'm just here to get a paycheck. You know, I don't want to deal with this annoying customer. I hate my boss. You know, what is the cost of that model, right? Which is the model that I'm afraid most of the workers are living in now. They're not passionate about what they're doing. They don't love what they're doing. They're just trying to not get fired. They're just trying to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads, right? And so there's this, where are we coming from, and how much we have to unlearn. I think that's a lot of what, there's not just what we learn and have to learn, but there's what we're unlearning, which is to not have a sense of ownership about our society, our economy, our political system, our culture. I think maybe if we can talk about that a little more, as radical or as off the wall as that might sound, people might be a little more prepared for what's really involved. I'm interested in other people's thoughts about that.
Maybe my thoughts is that you have to do it. I mean, you're talking about a governance, to be nerdy about it. But that's what this shared ownership, that's what being a good citizen is about. Is about caring about a plurality of things. And learning how to do that really requires going through it. You can't learn that, I don't think, in a book. And if you're to pick up a new governance system for an organization, it's so difficult to do that from reading through the 20-point list and this and that's the important thing to do. You got to just sit through a meeting, and after 2, 3 meetings, you're like, I get it. All right, I see how this goes. And you kind of got to go through it. And for us, sort of, leaning on the story that I was telling, when we talk to our customers, they're all in. They love the cooperative. They love that this is supporting the local and doing all of these things. Our customers are 100% there, but our workers and our laborers have been sort of all over the place, because when you put people in it, then you actually have to like deal with the conundrums that exist in your sort of world, and you have to work through it. And if we were a worker cooperative, I think of like 20, 30 people, and we were bringing new people in, there would be a strength of culture that would sort of move through that. And so we've struggled in being small, and so we're susceptible to new people coming in and out. But that speaks to the education of experience, and that's what's required, and that's kind of why cooperatives are such a great thing, and worth working for, and worth the effort.
Oh yeah, and Jim is also in Geo. That's great. Go check out Geo. There's like stories about cooperation here in the US and all over the world. It's a beautiful publication. All right, folks, I could stay here all night with you and learn so much. But it's 7 o'clock, and I know folks will probably want to go have dinner.
I have a quick comment. Can I?
Yes.
This is Danny. Hi. Sorry, I'm driving, so sorry if there's any background noise. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you very, very much. It's been like, I think it was an hour already. I was enjoying the whole conversation. I just wanted to point out that all banks are not born the same. I work for the National Co-op Bank, and we finance worker co-ops. So please, if Jim, I'm open to actually looking for an SBA-backed worker co-op financing. So if you have a worker co-op that we can finance, and the financing can be guaranteed by the SBA, please let us know. SBA is actually, well, let me rephrase that. I was going to say SBA is looking for. SBA was looking for, before this new administration, a worker co-op backed, a worker co-op that they could guarantee. NCB has financed 2 co-ops that were both guaranteed by the SBA. Yes, there was some little bit of workings to make that happen, but we're interested, we're pleading with the worker co-op community to be able to finance one with the SBA guarantee. Hopefully they don't call it communism with the people that are practicing fascism or whatever they want to call it. Sorry, I didn't need to bring politics into this, but politics is in this already because of what's going on. So thank you very much, everyone. That's my comment.
Thank you for lifting that up. There is an option in SBA lending if there can be a third-party guarantor, and so that is a possibility for SBA loans. And thank you for reminding me of that.
Beautiful. And if folks missed Dami and Kate Katib from Seed Commons 2 weeks ago at our kickoff, we'll be sharing the recordings. So check your email, and you can catch their discussion of what do lenders look for. But yeah, thank you so much. I'm so grateful. Thank you, Ajowa, Jim, and Ben.
Thank you.
This was really great. And folks, we'll share the link to the survey here in the chat, and we'll send it by email as well. Please let us know, any thoughts you have, any comments, any feedback. That's how we get better. And in 2 weeks, we'll have our third Boost Camp session, and it will be, gosh, who are we
Making
doing?
membership meaningful with Leslie Watson from Luminate.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is such a great follow on to what you all were sharing. You're like, you know what's important? Having membership be solid. So we're gonna do a session on that next time. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. That's great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lacey.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you
James.
so much. All right. Great. Have a good night.
Good night.
See you tomorrow.